and salutations, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of ColeCast, the podcast for all of us. And I tell you, this is going to be a fun episode. I've been looking forward to doing this one for a while because this is going to be a really cool subject, I think, that doesn't get nearly enough love, at least in my opinion, as an old head. As you know, we are in the summer time here. And what does everybody love about the summertime? It's movies, right? We love going to the theater. We love checking out movies. This was embedded in me early on as a child. I'm sorry, I just want to dance. I just want to do the dance. I couldn't resist. Anyways, so summer films, the big blockbuster extravaganzas that we all know and love, right? It's summertime is where the biggest, the baddest, and the best come out every year. But I gotta tell you, there was a time frame, believe it or not, where the big summer blockbuster didn't necessarily, I mean, you'd have a couple movies, but not to where it was like everything had to be put out in the summertime. And you could debate like when this originally started, what was the first real big one, but today, on today's episode of ColeCast, we're going to talk about what, in my opinion, was the defining summer of the movie blockbuster, talking about the summer of 1989. Now, for you old heads out there like old Xlj, if you know, you know. But for those of you who don't know, let me paint you a picture of a wonderful and glorious time that was 1989. Now, first of all, little Xlj at that time, he was only about 5 years old, but still, it was a glorious time as we transitioned from the 80s into the 90s. And of course, the 80s, it was all about, you know, the new wave of technology, the newest thing. Consumerism was at an all-time high. Everybody wanted to get their hands on that hot product. And films were just booming, man. This summer, I'm telling you, I find it, and people have talked about this before, but I think you're going to be hard pressed to find a summer that had this many big hits and blockbusters in it. And to kind of give you an idea of what I'm talking about, like of just some of these films, which we're going to mention here in this episode. Check this.
Everything you can expect in films this summer, from the biggest
Happy New Year!
Bosom.
to the smallest.
Sprinklers!
The Flash and the Dash. We'll show you who's back.
Who are you gonna call?
Nazis. I hate these guys.
Guys like you don't die on toilets.
Who's new.
Albert Einstein.
And how you'll see some familiar faces in some unfamiliar roles.
You can call me Joker.
You call this archaeology?
We'll show you who's got the effects.
Nick, what happened?
Who's got the action.
You're too stupid to have a good turn.
And who's got the laughs.
Don't put any of those old cheap moves on me.
No.
It's different.
I have all new cheap moves.
Man, if that doesn't get you jazzed and excited for this episode, I don't know what will. So many amazing movies coming out in this summer of 89. So let's just get right into it, okay? And you're going to notice a trend of certain like films that come out in this era. But we got to start off with The King of the Hill at the top of the mountain. By far, the summer of 1989 was all about one thing and one thing only, and that was Batmania. That's right. Batman released on June the 23rd of that year. It was a historic event in my childhood, I got to tell you, man. Like, I just remember being so enamored with this. Obviously, I was a huge like fan of superhero films. It's just superheroes in general. And yeah, keep in mind, at this time, folks, superhero films were practically non-existent, at least on the big budget level that Batman was. The only thing that had really come out and been successful was Superman in the 70s. And even in the 80s, as they did later Superman films, they just did not quite succeed as well as the original So a lot of people, just comic book films were just looked upon as like failures, which is crazy to think in this day and age we're in now. Like every comic book is practically turned into a film. But back then, it was a huge gamble to do something like this that Warner Brothers did with 1989's release of Batman. Because another thing you got to keep in mind too, if you look in pop culture at that time frame, the only real reference we had of Batman was outside of cartoons was the 1960s series with Adam West and Burt Ward, which we all know and love, but also was campy as hell. It wasn't truly capturing the authenticity of Batman. And I think something else that really helped expedite this into the summer there, or into 89 when it was released, was in the 80s, the redefining of the character with Frank Miller's comics that he did, like The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Returns, which put a different, more adult type of contemporary spin on the Batman character. And that's what Tim Burton was going for in Batman 1989. I mean, you think about it this way, like at the time, Tim Burton, a successful director, or come off just a big hit, but not nearly the body of work that Tim Burton is known for. I mean, at this point, Tim Burton has pretty much his big hits was really Pee-wee's Big Adventure and Beetlejuice. Now, Beetlejuice had come out the year prior, which was a huge hit. And then also putting Michael Keaton in the title role as Batman was a huge risk because people at the time frame weren't buying it. They were looking at the physicality of it, you know, with Michael Keaton being shorter than like what you would anticipate as the Batman character. And I mean, really all we'd know Michael Keaton from at that point was Mr. Mom and Beetlejuice. So that was another huge thing too. You have this new director, this new, you know, star, up and coming star, the amount of money they spent into this, the practical effects. Oh, like they captured the true essence of what Gotham City looks like. I mean, when I think of Gotham City, I think back to this film. And of course, Jack Nicholson as the Joker. I mean, my gosh, it's amazing to think because I mean, at that time frame, I thought like, okay, you're never going to get another Joker than Jack Nicholson, but good God, look at that character over the years of the great actress that's played him, everyone from Heath Ledger to Joaquin Phoenix, just to name a few. But Batman, the summer of 89 was all about Batman because this was like I say, this was a new big budget film, like something we hadn't quite seen yet, really. And it was just one of those things where it's crazy to say this, but at the time, this was a huge risk for Warner Brothers to put out there. But man, oh man, did Batmania sweep the land. I can remember, like I say, I was 5 at the time, and I can remember this movie just being heavily hyped and marketed. And yes, at this point, movies beforehand had like tie-ins with different, you know, toys, shirts, etc., etc. But to me, this Batman was like the first real movie where it was like there was like Batman everything. They had Batman trading cards, Batman cereal, Batman toys, Batman shirts, Batman everything. Batman was everywhere. You couldn't escape it, man. And I tell you, like the stuff sold like hotcakes. I can describe this all day, but let me show you a little something here that really kind of puts things in perspective to truly tell you how huge of an event it was when Batman came out the summer of 1989.
Out this summer, what do you think it's going to be like?
Oh, I can't wait. I love Michael Keaton. He's one of my favorite funny people. And I love Jack Nicholson, and I love the trailer. I love the whole thing. I'm ready to go.
Oh, it's going to be live, man. It's going to be live. I'm going to come see it.
The trailer was better than the movie we just saw.
How do you think Michael Keaton's going to be as Batman?
Sexy. Very sexy. Oh, he's just a gorgeous guy. He has like great legs and everything.
What kind of Joker is Jack Nicholson going to be?
Nicholson, like I say, he's great all the time, so I think he is a Joker, so he's probably just going to play himself.
I mean, with Jack Nicholson in it, I mean, how can you go wrong? I mean, especially his makeup, that's great, man.
Jack Nicholson is casted as the perfect Joker. Michael Keaton's adorable. and my husband will just be counting the minutes to see Kim Basinger.
But the only thing I could have changed about it was letting me play the babe.
The crowd started gathering over the weekend in anticipation of a movie premiere so big it had to be held in 2 theaters. By the time the limousines began to arrive, the crowds filled the streets of Westwood Village. Warner Brothers offered a few hundred free tickets to the first hopefuls in line. Despite their get-up, the 36-hour wait at the head of the line was no joke.
So we're being squished to death up here instead of being mashed to death back there.
There's no other way of putting it. This evening, Los Angeles has gone bats. Rank-and-file bat maniacs were there by the thousands, but they weren't the only ones swept up in the excitement. Some of Hollywood's biggest stars turned out for the premiere, giving the event the glitter of vintage Tinseltown. Attendees included Sylvester Stallone, Eddie Murphy, Don Johnson with Melanie Griffith, Glenn Close, and dozens of other top-flight celebrities. Peter Guber, co-executive producer of Batman, was delighted with the turnout at the end of his 10-year effort to bring the Caped Crusader to the screen.
It's finally here. It's just beyond words. I mean, a lot of great films we've done, but this is like a life experience. I'm thrilled.
How does this feel?
Pretty damn good.
The crowd's biggest welcome came for fast-moving Michael Keaton, who plays the title role in Batman. Keaton's casting as the Dark Knight was the most controversial aspect of the film's production, but those concerns seem to be over. Are you among those who are concerned about Michael Keaton playing Batman?
At first I was, and now I think it'll be great.
What changed your mind?
The previous.
I think Michael Keaton will far surpass what you expect. It's going to be the new Batman, the new wave Batman of the 90s.
Wait till they get a load of me.
The crowd did wait to get a look at Jack Nicholson, who plays the scene-stealing Joker in Batman. He was expected to helicopter in from the set of The Two Jakes, the sequel to Chinatown, in which he is the lead actor and director. But despite the bat signals, he arrived halfway through the movie after all the cameras and most of the crowd had already gone back to their caves. Dennis Michael, CNN Entertainment News, Hollywood.
Bat in Gotham City.
Nice outfit.
The Caped Crusader has inspired one of the hottest new looks in T-shirts these days, and Bat fans certainly dressed the part tonight as they lined up early to be among the first to see their heroes return.
2 o'clock the tube for Batman. Are all those people waiting now? You're kidding.
You see, Batman and a lot of these folks go way back.
But this is an old shirt. It's not one of the new ones. We got this years ago, so we're old Batman fans.
Batmania this summer. Everyone wants to see this movie.
Probably because we grew up with Batman and we're all familiar with it, and it's good to see a hero come back and, and save the day.
I have given a name to my pain.
What are you?
I'm Batman.
But Michael Keaton as Batman shares star billing with Jack Nicholson, whose Joker is really wild.
You look fine.
I didn't ask.
He just reflects he is the Joker. They had to have him in mind when they made the movie.
My life is really complex.
And Warner Brothers is banking on the fact that the movie will only whet the appetites of real Bataholics. They've come out with mugs and a whole catalog of Batman memorabilia. In fact, there is even a 1-800-BATMAN number in here to get your merchandise to you faster. And some of these people are not just Bat fans, they're Bat fanatics. Excuse me, what would ever possess you to do that to your hair?
I love Batman. I would be Batman if they let me. I'd be Batman if I had a cape. I'd be Batman. Yes, yes.
Yes, folks love Batman, and I'll tell you, already people are lining up to buy tickets to the special 12:20 showing of Batman this morning at the Americana. There are 8 showings daily, as you can see here at the Americana, so I guess Bat fans don't have to settle for the same Bat time or even the same Bat theater starting tomorrow. Reporting live from the Americana in Southfield, Teresa Lucanis, TV2 Eyewitness News.
You remember that old saying, flying like a bat out of, well, you know the saying. Well, that's the way people are flocking to retail outlets to get their share of Batmania.
Now, what do you think?
Retailers think it's wonderful, and they pulled out all the Bat stops. Bat shoes, Bat towels, Bat shirts, Bat mugs, and none of the Bat goods are hanging around.
Well, like the Joker T-shirt, I wish I had one here to show you, but obviously we've had a couple of orders of those come in. They're gone. The hats are gone. I mean, it's just certain items that just continue to go.
More than 100 companies have been licensed to sell the Caped Crusader, not the movie, but the merchandise. Even his royal purple badness, Prince, has come out with a soundtrack. More hype for a movie that hasn't quite left the Batcave yet.
I think it's going to be rad.
Really? What's rad?
Radical.
Okay.
Cool.
All right. And kids aren't the only ones experiencing holy cow syndrome. The older generation has been keeping this McKinney Avenue Bat Gallery pretty busy. Old movie marquees, Batman miniatures, buttons, and yes, comic books are going like Batcakes.
Batman's become hip and cool, and people can come out of the closet and admit that they read Batman and that comics are in vogue now.
Theater employees will probably clean up in overtime this weekend. People have been trying to buy tickets now since early this morning. So as the fever builds, Batman is already in the bag, retailers say, and if the movie's a hit or not may not even matter. Now, Batman will open in some 2,000 theaters nationwide this weekend, and considering all the money they spent on the hype, the movie producers are hoping that they too can scream holy cow, that is, when the box office receipts are totaled. Larry Mullins, Channel 5 News, at a theater near you.
See what I mean? It was all about Batmania, man. Like I say, it literally swept the nation. And the thing of it is hey, they have a mission accomplished, because Batman not only was the talk of the town that summer, but it was the highest grossing film of the summer of '89, which is very competitive, which you're going to see as we go through this list here on ColeCast. But Batman, the #1 grossing film, I have fond memories of this for multiple reasons, but mainly I remember going to see this with my dad in theaters and just being so enamored and enthralled with it. It was like the perfect day, you know. I remember like going and getting like some Batman trading cards afterwards, and there's like a Batman toy. And then I can remember for my birthday that year, I actually received a VHS copy of Batman. Which, man, oh man, I watched the crap out of that thing, dude. Like that thing, I wore that VHS out. I can still hear the Diet Coke commercial right now. Anyways, but Batman dominated the summer of '89. But the thing is, there were so many more hits that come out that year in the summer of '89. Outside of Batman, if you look at the list of films, the summer was predominantly dominated by sequels and other film series is like continuing on. That was the vast majority of the big hits, and we're going to talk about those next. And the first one we got to talk about, I would say, easily was probably the most anticipated sequel of the summer, and that, of course, was Ghostbusters 2, because we all know and love Ghostbusters 1, man. I mean, Ghostbusters is one of the greatest movies of all time. And so, you know, we waited, I think it was 4 or 5 years for the sequel to come out. And I mean, it had some huge shoes to fill. Did it succeed? You know what? It's a solid sequel, but in comparison to the first one, is it as good as the first one? No. But it's still a pretty damn good sequel nonetheless. And I mean, to me, I still find myself like quoting lines from this film as well. Maybe not as many as the first one, but still, it's a solid effort. But the thing is, the hype on this thing, man, was just like, this is going to be like the next great big thing. And like, it just, I don't want to say it fell flat, but it just didn't live up nearly to the hype as the first one, I would say. And I think that's a fair assessment. I do remember definitely the villain in this, the guy in the painting, which I can't think of his name right now, but and then the guy that was like the creepy assistant. And I remember like the goo coming out of the painting and stuff, and they're going after Sigourney Weaver's baby and stuff, and yeah, it's creepy, man. But Ghostbusters 2 was definitely something everybody had been waiting to see. But as hyped up as Ghostbusters 2 was, I would say it was neck and neck as far as the hype train for this next one, continuing on in the series. Lethal Weapon 2, man, with Mel Gibson and Danny Glover. The first one's fucking awesome, man. Like, I love Lethal Weapon. And let me tell you something, Lethal Weapon is a damn Christmas movie. I said what I said. But Lethal Weapon 2, the follow-up, once again, kind of like Ghostbusters 2. Like, it was a solid movie, good movie in the series, but it didn't really live up to the hype as the first one. And this is another one we waited like 4 or 5 years for, I believe. You look at Mel Gibson in the 80s is on the rise. He does like the Mad Max films, he does Lethal Weapon, like so I mean, this is like he's one of the hot Hollywood stars at this point. And of course, Danny Glover, man, I'm too old for this shit, No, Mr. Glover, your career was really just starting to truly ascend. Even though he did do Predator 2, which that did suck. I'm just saying. But Lethal Weapon 2, like, I don't remember. I mean, obviously, I've seen it. I have the box set of all the Lethal Weapon movies. But like I say, there's just nothing really about it that stands out over like the first one does. Now, you do get the first introduction to the Joe Pesci's character in Lethal Weapon 2, which was fucking annoying, if I'm being honest. But I say this is another one of the sequels, one of many that came out that year. Once again, not as good as the first one. Now, this next one, though, a lot of hype on this one. And this was at the time pretty much going to be the end of the series. And in my mind, I still consider it like the end of the series. And it was the first movie that came out from this summer. And by the way, let me clarify. When we're talking summer films of this year, we're talking like from May pretty much to August. Because you could argue April, there's some films that came out that was big, like i.e. Field of Dreams and stuff. But nonetheless, let's talk about it. Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Yeah, because at this point, it was like, okay, we've done Raiders, we've done Temple, and it's like, all right, Spielberg is like, let's wrap this up, let's put a bow on this. And of course, the big character we get introduced was to Indiana Jones's dad, played by the phenomenal Sean Connery. I don't think this movie really gets enough love because everybody loves Temple, everybody loves Raiders. Great movies, by the way, amazing movies. But Temple of Doom Last Crusade holds its own up against those two other films. But this was like this film for 1989, the summer of '89, really set the precedent for the rest of the films that would come out that year too. But I don't know. Like I personally, I enjoyed this movie. Like I think there's a lot of people that are like, okay, they rehashed some stuff from Raiders and put in this, but I mean that's not necessarily a bad thing. I don't think. But like I say, I think this is a film when you think of Indiana Jones, you either gravitate towards Raiders and Temple, which were both freaking awesome films. But a lot of people forget about Last Crusade for whatever reason. And of course, you compare it to the latter films that would come out, here in the past 10 years, which were pure utter dog shit. Like I say, I always consider like just a trilogy, and the Last Crusade, literally in my mind, was the Last Crusade. But nonetheless, like I say, this I would say, in my opinion, of all the sequels that come out in the summer of '89. This by far is the best one. But there's several other sequels and continuing of series that came out that year as well. Such as we got to talk about The Karate Kid Part 3. Which I really think at this point had kind of wore itself out. Like the first one, dude, it's the first one. It's The Karate Kid. We didn't even have this discussion about The Karate Kid. The first one wasn't as great as it was. Second one, I get what they were doing when they went over to Japan, but it wasn't as fun as the first one. So this one, it was kind of like going into it's like, okay, we're getting back to Daniel San and Mr. Miyagi are going to be back home. We're going to pick up where we left off, and then you're feeling that you get now in Karate Kid Part 3. It just at the time it was just like, okay, this doesn't really feel like as good as the first one as they had like with like Cobra Kai and stuff. But what I find fascinating about this film though is the relevancy of it now that the Cobra Kai series has taken place. I find myself looking back on this and being kind of more invested into it, as because I think what it was we didn't really get the and I'm sorry, I can't remember the name for the life of me of the bad guy in this one, but the guy that pretty much takes over Cobra Kai. We kind of learn his backstory, I think, a little bit more in the Cobra Kai series. So it's interesting to me because it's like I remember watching this back in the day and not really giving a shit, but now I can go back and watch it and be like, oh, okay, this is kind of cool. But in comparison to the other Karate Kids, especially from like a box office standpoint, it didn't do as great, but I mean, it was still one of the big hits of the summer. Like I say, man, it's like it's another one in the series, and you'll notice that too, like in the summer of '89 too. It's not like defining moments in like these different film and not film series. It's just like another chapter, so to speak. So, but like I say, it's weird to me because I can look back and like Karate Kid 3 is actually kind of entertaining now. So go figure, 20 years later. Also, we got another edition in the Star Trek film franchise with Star Trek V, The Final Frontier. Now, you hear this and you probably think like, okay, it's like Star Trek films. But this is the thing, Star Trek films back in the 80s, man, they were like pretty damn popular, actually. Hell, they made 5 of them for crying out loud. Now, Final Frontier to me kind of, I enjoyed these films because my dad enjoyed these films. But I just like nothing sticks out from Final Frontier. Other than just like, okay, no disrespect to the actors, but these guys are way too old to be like, I was like, all right, let's put a wrap on this, man. This is the Final Frontier. We need to be donezo with this. So certainly no Wrath of Khan. That's for damn sure. No Search for Spock. No Voyage Home. Because if you think about like those 3 films, so like the first Star Trek, it was what it was. It was more of a spectacle because I mean that came out in the 70s and like the practical effects and it was amazing at the time. And you can still look back and I think it holds up. But when you look at like Wrath of Khan is arguably like the best one in the series of these Star Trek films. And then, Search for Spock, we're obviously following up on the story of Wrath of Khan, and Voyage Home, we're following up at the end of Spock. So we're finally getting back to square one, so to speak. But Final Frontier, like I say, man, I'll be honest with y'all, I don't remember a whole hell of a lot of it. I can't even remember what the plot was other than it was just like supposed to be the last one. And essentially, if you don't count like the generations, I mean, this was like the last Star Trek film, so of the original cast. So. But speaking of other like franchises that was going on, let's talk about License to Kill, which I don't know, was like the umpteenth James Bond film. So at this point, we're on to Timothy Dalton as Bond, who we've already seen in one Bond film. The thing is, I thought Timothy Dalton was a good Bond. I don't think the guy gets nearly enough love. I would say, I don't know, some could argue this, but I would say License to Kill, I think, was probably one of the better Timothy Dalton Bond films, which I think Timothy Dalton did, I want to say 3 Bond films. I may be wrong on that, but I one thing I liked about this, so to me, what always makes a great Bond film is you got to have a great villain. And I was a huge fan of, and once again, I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the names, man. I can only have so much pop culture knowledge up here, folks. A lot of it's like reserved for wrestling, and then there's like just everyday like routine of wiping my ass or something that's up here. Oh, y'all are like, what the fuck is Xlj talking about? But anyways, I digress. I can't remember the actor's name. I do remember, of course, him being like one of the brothers and one of the bad guys in the Goonies. So he was like, he's got one of those faces. He's one of those actors from that time frame that you just see him and you're like, oh yeah, he played a bad guy in this or did that or whatever. And he was great at playing a bad guy. And he was great as a Bond villain too. hey, as we like to say here on ColeCast, you could always Wikipedia that shit. So, nonetheless, this, once again, it just ties in with like all like the big budget stuff that was coming out in the summer of '89. I don't know how well it did as in comparison to other Bond films. I mean, I think it was I think at this point it was like, okay, MGM's like, let's put a Bond film out, like, and for them at this point too, this was like their big like ticket film. But if you look at it in comparison to the other films that were coming out in that time frame, they just weren't quite knocking it out of the park. Let's put it that way. But once again, you're seeing this trend here. We're continuing on with like sequels and franchises, and let's just keep that gravy train going, baby. Because also in the summer of '89, we got some horror franchises continuing on, and we got Nightmare on Elm Street 5. The Dream Child came out in the summer of '89. Of course, this is following up off of Nightmare 4. So we're getting a continuation of that story, like with like Freddy's kid and shit, So not as good as the other Nightmare films. Like I would even safely say, thinking about it in hindsight, I think the thing is, for me personally, I didn't like. There wasn't a bad Nightmare film, but there was like I was more enthralled with other storylines, and this was probably my least favorite of them. It was like I said, it was all right. It was a Freddy film, man. Hey, the thing is, man, summer of '89, like you're going to the theater, you're going to the drive-in, whatever. You got your big bucket of popcorn, your Coca-Cola, whatever, And then this is another cool, fun, exciting flick to check out. So, like I say, it was another one in the franchise. Maybe not so much like one of the stronger ones, but not a bad flick. As far as like box office, it did okay. Like I think other Nightmare films have made more money than it. Hey man, like I say, New Line Cinema's like, let's milk this gravy train, baby. And speaking of milking gravy trains in horror films, yes, Friday the 13th Part 8 came out. And this is a time in this franchise where it's like, what the fuck else can we do? I know. Let's take him to Manhattan and see what the hell happens. Yes, it's Jason Takes Manhattan, Friday the 13th, Part 8. Okay, this is like a hit or miss one. I'm going to be honest with y'all. It's a guilty pleasure of mine. I fucking love this movie. It's so fucking stupid. It's great, man. Seeing Jason Voorhees run through fucking New York City, and you got all these asshole New Yorkers, like, trying to talk shit to him and stuff. The best scene of this film by far, up on the rooftop where our hero's being chased, and he's just finally like, fuck it, and he's boxing like Jason, man, and he's hitting him with everything, and it's not doing a damn thing. So Jason takes one shot, uppercuts him, and fucking literally beheads him. Like, such good shit. Cinema, baby. A lot of people will tell you, oh, this is like one of the worst ones, if not the worst of the Friday the 13th. But I think us diehards, like, it holds a special place in our hearts. But Paramount knew what the fuck it was. They knew what they were getting out of it at this point. It was like, in comparison to some of the other films that came out, not as expensive to make. Let's get it out there, churn it out. Like I say, it is what it is, man. Like so many great horror movie franchises exist because it was just like, all right, this is a proven pattern. We're gonna fill your palate and you're gonna love it. And like I say, it got people in theaters, man, and people still talk about it today. And you'll notice that's a trend on all these movies we're talking about here on ColeCast. These are movies people hold near and dear, and they still talk about to this day. Well, that was just a list of all your sequels and continuation in the series of films. But the 1989 also had some other huge successful standalone films or start of franchises or whatnot, like Batman. And I would say easily, I think the biggest surprise of 1989 was Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, starring Rick Moranis, which came out in 1989. So literally in the summer of 89, I can literally remember going to see 2 movies in theaters. Of course, Batman, and it was actually Honey, I Shrunk the Kids was the other one. And I just remember being so just like mesmerized by this film and the thoughts of like a kid being shrunk down to like ant size and rummaging through your backyard, man. Um I still watch this movie today, and it's a great movie. It's still visually pleasing once again, and I mean with the practical effects in this film was fucking great. Um, I think this is another one I don't think gets nearly as much love, and of course it started a film franchise. You had Honey, I Blew Up the Kid, and then you've got like the Disney Channel stuff they did later on. But Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, man, just a wild concept, but man, it worked. It worked. And like I say, the visuals on this is just incredible. Like this is a movie that shows me and proves to me like I would much rather have a practical effect movie over any CGI movie any day of the week, dude. So, and it was a massive success too. Okay. Let me put things in perspective to you on this, which is really like amazing about this. Number one, it came out on June 23rd, which was the exact same day as Batman came out. So it's already got that going against it. If you look at like the total amount of theaters it was released in, so to give you a comparison, Batman was put in over 2,000 theaters, whereas Honey, I Shrunk the Kids was only in roughly about 1,500 theaters. So Batman already has like a huge leg up, but this was like the little engine that could, man, was Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. And you know what else was cool about it? It had a Roger Rabbit cartoon beforehand, which I was all about. So like I say, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids is a great film. It's a film I look back on very fondly, and I think it fits in great in the time frame when it come out in 89 because as I said before, you know, at the start of this episode of ColeCast, the summer of 80 or the year of the like late 80s into the 90s was all about like finding what that next great big technological advance was going to be. So, you know, here you have a scientist who can shrink his kids. You know, maybe I can buy the shrink rate at like Circuit City in a couple of years or something. I don't know. But big surprise hit of the summer of 89 was Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Another big surprise coming out of that year too was Dead Poets Society, starring Robin Williams. And of course, Robin Williams, we all love and adore. And at this time frame, for the most part, Robin had done a lot of comedic roles. He had done some serious roles too as well. But he was mostly known for his comedy, of course. But this was like the first real, like, I would say successful drama that Robin Williams did. And man, oh man, like this movie it's one of those things that's so heavily looked back on and quoted, you know, oh, Captain, my Captain, you know, you think of the stuff that happened in this and it's a period piece too, because I mean, the story takes place, I believe it's in the 1950s or so, where Robin Williams is like teaching essentially poetry to the school boys. So great cast in this movie too, by the way, as well. But I don't think anybody was expecting this movie to do as well as it did. It made a lot of money. But Dead Poets Society, it's one of those movies we look back on and I tell you, man, it's I remember watching this in like school. I think because for me at the time, I'm a 5-year-old, I don't give a shit, whatever, you know. But for me as a kid looking back on it, like, or for me looking back on it now, you know, I remember discovering this movie really as like a teenager. And I love Robin Williams, number one. I mean, who didn't love Robin Williams? The late, great Robin Williams. Phenomenal actor. But nonetheless, huge hit there in the summer of 89. And once again, I don't think it was a lot what people saw coming. Yeah, I love my segues. Sorry. Speaking of which, if you know, you know. When Harry Met Sally was the big romantic comedy of that year, came out. And this was another one, like, I don't think anybody really saw like being like a huge hit. It was just like, all right, this is a summer movie. Let's put it out. Let's see what it does. Nice little mixture in between like the big budget films and stuff that was coming out that year. But when Harry Met Sally came out, it was it was a huge hit. It was a huge success. The chemistry between Billy Crystal and Meg Ryan, man, was off the charts. And I mean, Billy Crystal we knew, of course, off of SNL, and had a couple other films that he did, but like this was really like Billy Crystal's first like big hit when you think about it. And Meg Ryan too. I mean, Meg Ryan had a successful career up to this, but this is definitely the movie that put them both on the map. And hey, the other thing is too with this, you look back on it. I mean, it's one of the most iconic scenes in all film, the restaurant scene, coming from this movie as well. So, I mean, when Harry Met Sally, it's one of those films that we still talk about to this day, and it holds up the test of time. And regardless of the period of time frame it took place, you can still look back on it 30 years later, and it's still just as awesome. And this was the number 7 highest grossing film of the summer of '89, as it made over $92 million at the box office. And by the way, these figures and stuff I'm throwing out here, these aren't like, I guess I'm just, I'm no expert in this. You could always Wikipedia this shit. I'm sure some of the numbers I'm off or are off on, but like you get the idea. The movie's made a fuck ton of money. Let's put it that way. But like I say, When Harry Met Sally was a sleeper hit in the summer of 1989. Another big hit that came out in '89 was The Abyss, which was James Cameron's film. This movie, okay, here's the thing. This movie, to me, I've seen it. I do have it. The visual effects on it are so ahead of its time. Really showing what like visual effects can do. But damn, this is a long, boring ass film. I'm sorry, but fuck, this is a long, boring ass film. Those were some of the big hits of the summer of '89, but '89 also had some great comedies that came out that year as well. And I gotta talk about this, man. Weekend at Bernie's. This is like the typical like '80s comedy film for me, man. Like the premise is essentially these two guys go on like a weekend getaway with their boss, essentially, who has this like killer party at his beach house, literally, because the next day pretty much Bernie is dead. So they have to pretend that Bernie is still alive, even by like kind of holding him up and stuff, so people don't realize that he's dead, so they can still get the benefits of like having a fun ass weekend. I don't know, man. It was the fucking '80s, dude. What can you say? I don't know, dude. Like Weekend at Bernie is just a stupid fun movie. Is the best way I could describe it to you, man. Now this was a huge hit in the summer of '89. Turner and Hooch, starring Tom Hanks, and at this time frame too, you got to realize like Tom Hanks is starting to be on the rise as the next big Hollywood star. Tom Hanks had done some other flicks at the time, but nothing huge and massive. He's done like Bachelor Party, The Burbs, just to name a few there. But this movie, I think, surprised the hell of a lot of people. It's interesting too, because you look at the summer of '89 and you look at like Disney Studios, like their best films that come out that year were pretty much like these live action films, like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids and Turner and Hooch, which was a Touchstone film, which of course Disney owned Touchstone. But yeah, I could still this is another one that holds up really well, man. Just Tom Hanks is like the shit he does with like Hooch and stuff, man. It's fucking hilarious. Like the just the dialogue and the banter he has with him. I mean, we've all had that frustration with a dog who pretty much, wrecks shop and destroys your shit and stuff. So, but Turner and Hooch is a great comedy, man. I can still watch that all the time. That's like one of those ones where I can easily plop it on anytime and be like, I can get invested into it. So here's another great film from summer of '89, a great comedy, Parenthood, which was a Ron Howard film. And I truly think Ron Howard had done some other stuff, but this was like, I think, the first realization that, like, you know what, Ron Howard is a damn good director. The cast on this thing is nuts, man. You got Steve Martin in it with Rick Moranis. You got Diane Wiest is in it, and then Mary Steenburgen's in it. You also have a young Keanu Reeves and I can't think of her name. The girl from the mom from Raising Hope is in this. It's a multi-character movie. Essentially, it's talking kind of like about the relationship between Steve Martin and his brother and sister, and their relationship with their dad, and then like how their lives goes as parenting as well with Steve Martin's kids, along with Diane Wiest's kid, and then their youngest brother, who's kind of like a I don't want to say a con artist, but a lazy piece of shit. Let's put it let's put it that way. But Parenthood's a hilarious movie, man. Hell, years later, they'd actually make a TV series based off of this movie, believe it or not. Parenthood, fucking awesome movie. Like a hidden gem, I would say. You definitely gotta check it out, man. Ah, yes. This movie is near and dear to me. I have seen this movie so many damn times. And in my opinion, I truly think this may be John Hughes' best film, Uncle Buck, with the late, great John Candy. You kids today just will not, unfortunately, get to experience like the greatness that was John Candy. I mean, you can look back on his films, man, but John Candy was like one of the coolest fucking like celebrities I can think of back in the day, man. I like his movies. The man, in my opinion, anyways, the man didn't have a bad movie. But Uncle Buck, to me, is one of the definitive John Candy movies. Just the way like his demeanor like change, how he's like, okay, yes, he can be looked upon as like a I don't say a bum, but just like, not up to like what society standards are for an adult, I guess, in the 80s, you could say. And to see him like the great relationship he has with kids in this film, and even though he's not a parent, how he still is like he's the parent who, like, with the rivalry he has with his niece, the oldest niece, just the back and forth and how he ends up earning her respect later on. And it's a John Hughes film. John Hughes did not make a bad movie, folks. But god dang it, I fucking loved Uncle Buck, man. Uncle Buck was it's one of those movies, seriously, I watch this every year. I at least watch this. I got a freaking poster of Uncle Buck, for crying out loud. That's how much I freaking love Uncle Buck. Man, it was such a good movie. Those are just some of the great comedies that come out in '89, but the last thing we got to talk about, the summer of '89, a ton of cult classics came out that year, and whether they were successful at the time frame or not, we'll discuss here. But I think one of the first ones you got to talk about, definitely, that was a huge success, was Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing, which is just another one of those films that's like iconic in cinema. I mean, you can still think of like the lines, like where the, stepping on the Jordans, and just like, I mean, Spike Lee was touching upon something that not a whole lot of other filmmakers were really doing. Now, I will say this from my personal experience with this, I didn't really watch this until like as an adult, mainly because I was an Indiana Pacers fan, and I was just like, Spike Lee's the devil. So anything he did, like, nope, can't watch. But man, this is actually a great film. It captures this time frame perfectly too, as well. and it really, like, with where it takes place, which is taking place in New York City, and just kind of like breaking down the different cultures there and stuff. It's really fascinating. I mean, it's a you hear that phrase, the movie was ahead of its time. This is definitely one of those films, and like I say, man, like this is a movie that I did not really appreciate till later on in life, and this is another one too. This was like a sleeper hit in 1989, which honestly, it's crazy to me to think like, wow, this came out in 89, but this was Sex, Lies, and Videotape, which was the first Steven Soderbergh film. But which is crazy to think, wow, it was 89. Um, and also I think too, I think this is first movie that really kind of put Miramax on the map, man. Because I mean, Miramax was just this like independent little studio. Not a whole lot of people knew about. This movie like killed it at Cannes Film Festival. And this was like a lot of critics like favorite movie that came out in the summer of '89. Um, this was definitely a sleeper hit in the summer. Then, oh yes, yes, fucking Roadhouse, baby, fucking Roadhouse, one of my all-time favorite action films. And yes, this movie did come out in the summer of '89. Ah, man, Patrick Swayze at his greatness. I mean, is there a better Patrick Swayze movie than Roadhouse? And Patrick Swayze was such a fucking good actor. I mean, there's others, you could say Red Dawn, you could say Point Break, but dude, it's Roadhouse all day for me, man. Dalton, come on, man. Come on, man. He's gonna fucking throat rip you. And of course Sam Elliott in this, and God, man, this man looking like a sexual dynamo. Like I am a heterosexual male, and I can say like Sam Elliott in this movie was sexy as fuck, man. Um, but the story of this, just the ultimate, like, just so the scenes in it's fucking great, man. The soundtrack's fucking awesome. The story's great. The just the machismo in this film, man. For anybody that has like low testosterone, you don't need like treatments or anything. Just fucking watch Roadhouse, and you get done watching Roadhouse, and you want to fucking go out like throat ripping people, doing roundhouse kicks and shit, ripping your shirt off. It's a badass movie, man. Also, Terry Funk was in this movie as well. But Roadhouse, God, man, Roadhouse was such a good fucking movie, man. In my opinion, I think this is his best movie. But I mean, in addition to what I already mentioned, shit, you got Ghost, Dirty Dancing. Man, I miss me some Patrick Swayze. R.I.P. R.I.P. Dalton. But Roadhouse, another great film that come out in the summer of '89. Let's talk about this one for a minute. Great Balls of Fire, the Jerry Lee Lewis biography, essentially, came out in the summer of 1989. And this one had Dennis Quaid starring as Jerry Lee Lewis. You have Winona Ryder playing his cousin, who was 13, and he married. Yikes. It's just still fucking crazy to think, but this was a pretty fun movie. This was a pretty good movie. It's an interesting, I mean, the story of Jerry Lee Lewis and like how he rose to fame, and just that whole thing with marrying his cousin. I was 13. Fucking weird, man. But nonetheless, it's a good watch. This not so much. Young Einstein. And I think this is the movie we're going to be talking about in this episode, where a lot of you are going to be like, what the fuck is Young Einstein? Because if you weren't in the 80s, you don't. And if I say the name Yahoo Serious, like, what the fuck is a Yahoo Serious? Well, let me tell you what a Yahoo Serious was. Yahoo Serious was an actor out of Australia. And there was a lot of hype around this movie when it came out in the summer of '89. It was supposed to be like, so the premise is essentially, this is Einstein as a younger man, and he discovers like rock and roll and like how to like put bubbles into beer and shit like that, and just all this other shit, man. It's like I don't know, man. It's funny because it put Yahoo Serious on the map, but it's weird because like in the States, this movie fucking bombed. But like in like Australian shit, this was like the highest grossing film. And I mean, yeah, you get it. It's like Yahoo Series is from Australia, right? But it also, this is one of those films. First one I think we're really talking about. Well, not the first one, but one of the lower grossing ones that's become a cult classic that I think there is a fan base for this out there. I can remember just like being intrigued by this because just looking at Yahoo Serious as young Einstein with the hair and shit and just being like, what the fuck is this? Like I say, Young Einstein, I think, is one of those cult classic films. And man, now this is one you may be familiar with, and it's definitely a cult classic film because we got it all, baby, on UHF. The Weird Al Yankovic movie that come out the summer of '89. Poor Weird Al, man, he was fighting a fucking battle. Like all these other great big budget movies we're talking about, and fucking UHF comes out that same time frame too. Didn't stand a chance. Was definitely one of the lower grossing films of the summer. Ranked number 41 amongst films and only made about 6 million. But it sure as shit got its audience later on in like VHS and like in being on like HBO and stuff like that. Because this is one of those movies I've looked back. This is another one I watch once a year probably. I fucking loved UHF. It's a killer comedy. Love Weird Al. I mean, who doesn't like Weird Al other than Coolio? I mean, the parody of this, the songs in this movie is fucking great. I'm a good sucker for like parody of like little pop culture elements because this time frame, you know, those that was kind of a popular thing and was well done at that time frame too. Like movies like Airplane and Naked Gun, for example, just silly satire. But this was, like I say, this was one of those movies, man, that just at the time frame it didn't do shit, but later on in life it had some successful legs. And as we've pretty much summed up the summer of '89, there's one more film we got to talk about. That was a well, let's just get right to it. And you know this channel, we talk a lot of wrestling. We got to talk about, yes, the Hulk Hogan starring No Holds Barred came out in the summer of 1989. Oh, No Holds Barred. Of course, Hulk not playing himself, but playing one Rip, a close proximity characterization of the Hulk Hogan character, I suppose. But and I like to, we gotta switch it up. So like, oh, Hogan wears red and yellow. All right, we're gonna have him wear like fucking blue and white in this. So success. But this movie introduced us to the late great Tommy Tiny Lister playing the bad guy Seuss. I remember the trailer for this as a kid. Honestly, I gotta say, it did kind of scare the crap out of me, Seuss. I was like just this menacing man who was like going after the Hulkster. And even though I wasn't really like a true Hulkamaniac back in the day, still like, you know, like every other kid, they fucking loved Hulk Hogan in the 80s. You couldn't escape it. The man had a cartoon, for God's sakes. But yeah, I just remember watching this as a kid and like not being as into it, but then later on, really, I don't want to say enjoy it, but I mean I like No Holds Barred. I mean it's not bad by any means. It's a solid effort from Hulk Hogan, I suppose. Definitely better than Mr. Nanny and like Santa with Muscles and some other shit he put out. I also remember too, like the looking back on it too, thinking of like the cameos from other wrestlers in this, like mainly, you know, shout out to Stan Hansen, like in the bar scene and stuff. And of course, you got the iconic line of Dookie. I mean, shit, dude. The bad guy in this too, and I can't think of his name, but he played like a really good bad guy in the 80s too as well, but it's like the network executive guy. And then like what was it? Like he had this weird catchphrase. Like something about his jock or something. Like a reference to like a jock strap or something. I don't know. It was just like jock ass. That's what it was. He called people jock ass, whatever the fuck jock ass is. But no holds barred. And also too, this was WWF's first time really producing a film, and Vince McMahon producing a film, which that's like all he really truly ever wanted to do. Because remember, the WWF's about making movies, pal. But you get my drift, folks. You get it. The summer of 1989 was just had so many big hits, made a huge bank. And I think it set the precedent really for like films and summers for them to come out and just have these massive, huge hits. And it was just like, okay, it really became like a competition with the studios of like, okay, the biggest movie we're going to put out, we're going to have to make it and we're going to have to put it out for the summer, And I mean, it just like, if you look at the years that followed, like it was just like each summer, it was just like hit after hit after hit. That's when your big budget movies came out. So, you can argue and say like the other time frames, it's different. But for me personally, I will always think the summer of 1989 as by far the most important time frame in big budget films in cinema history. Ah, yes. Now I just want to go back and like pop some popcorn and watch some of these films. So I have to watch No Holds Barred after this. Dookie. Anyways, let's go wrap it up for this episode of ColeCast. And as always, please don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. And hey, get out there this summer and watch some of these awesome movies that's coming out your way. I mean, there's some awesome movies already out, like the new Planet of the Apes is out. You got the Mad Max Furiosa's out. Deadpool and Logan, or Deadpool and Wolverine's coming out later this year. I'm pumped for that. But that's the thing, man. It was just a magical, magical thing about watching movies in the summertime. Well, once again, I'm Xlj the Og. And thank you for watching this episode of ColeCast. And we'll see you next time on another episode of ColeCast. Because it's no holds barred. Bye.